Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for the Sabbath day. We thank you for gathering us this morning to study your word and the present truth message for this time. We ask that you would empower thy servants with thy Holy Spirit, that they may teach us and show us, Lord, what is truth and what we need to learn and understand. And we ask that you would be with the listeners also. Help us to have a clear mind and a ready mind to understand what you have in store for us this morning. We ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. So this will be mics open and cameras on if you want. If you don't want, we're going to use the board back there. And for those that, and I saw that Luke is here, I believe, with Madison, and then Victor and Leanne. I think Victor and Leanne know what we do on a regular basis. But what we're doing today is a review. We did one a few weeks back and everybody really enjoyed it. It was a, we really didn't start with any particular direction and just from there went to reviewing the lines in various places. So that's what we all decided to do again today. And so I have some lines drawn up out there and I'll move the board here in just a minute. But I just wanted to for those that are joining us today, that's what we're actually working on. And then in the afternoon, we're going to continue what we started last night with Isaiah 50 and 51, keeping in mind the connections to Psalm 78. So everybody can hear okay, right?
Yes.
Okay. Let me move the board. I should move it first. Okay. Yeah, you can see that pretty good. I got my cheat sheet. You guys aren't supposed to see my cheat sheet. But I have a cheat sheet here. I'm surrounded by dogs. You see that okay then?
Yes.
Okay, so I drew three different lines that we can work on today or wherever we wind up going. But like I said, I want it to be a group participation, kind of testing and strengthening our own minds in the message. So first I have Eden to Eden, and then the Acts 27 line, and then the line of Protestantism. And what I put down here was just kind of an additional, I mentioned it at the end of our Sabbath school lesson of looking at it. I'll probably erase it just to get it so it's not in the way. But just looking at the parallels and we need to start looking at and recalling back and looking at the history between 2012 and 2014, how the election, how we went from a Democrat president to midterms of a Republican victory, even though they're the minority party. And then the same thing here, because we're seeing this happen again. We have a Democrat president, and we're going to see a Republican win, and even though they're in the minority. And we know a lot about the gerrymandering and all the different things that they do. We know the issues of voter rights that are taking place and how they're trying to restrict voting. And it's really interesting to hear them say, we're not restricting voting, we're making it to where everybody can vote, and the Democrats are trying to restrict voting. So it really is about conspiracy theories and what you listen to and what you feed on, to whether or not you look for yourself to see if those things are so. But that will lead us to, this led us to Trump, among a lot of things that led to, it literally seemed to bring out what was in people's hearts, make it okay to express the hatred that's in their hearts. And there's a lot of other things, but that's one that always sticks out in my mind. But as we, and we've got Panning in here, and as we go to the 2022 elections, midterm elections, we saw here that there was anger that Obama was elected again, and they began this this fight to make sure that the Republican minority party won the House and Senate. And we have here a Democrat president that has this far right riled up again, and they want to make sure that they win the 2022 election, even though they are in the minority. So they use voter rights, gerrymandering, and all the other tactics to win, so that they can then address the main issue that's they're angry about, is all the equality rights that we see that are happening here and that happened back in here. And we know line upon line that this leads us to the Sunday law. So in another line that was studied, which I don't have up here, we see that in 2021 marks the agitation that leads to it. Okay, so who wants to begin? I guess we start with Eden for Eden to Eden. And who would like to begin?
When you say begin, you mean add the numbers and stuff, add the dates?
Whatever comes to your heart, where we can fill in some of these things, because I do have, I did put a basic framework on there. What do we have happening back here?
Sin
Okay,
entered, close to your creation.
okay. And what was it based on?
Eve,
Eve. And
equal, sexism,
and
Cain worship,
yeah, Cain comes next, right?
and Ham and slavery.
And then what comes before Ham?
Flood,
The flood, okay. And what do we have? How many years do we have here before the flood?
1500.
Okay. And then we have Ham.
Yes.
Yeah. And we have slavery. So what is this teaching us? Of what we already know, what does this teach us?
But like ancient and modern stuff.
Yeah, you can go from there.
Mark's calling me. I'll be back.
Okay, somebody else? What do we learn from our studies, what we know about lines, what we know about the beginning and the end? What does this teach us about the end?
The order?
Is it chiasm?
Chiasm, okay. What's chiasm? And so somebody, whoever said chiasm, direct me to what we do at the end with our line, what we've learned.
It's going to be laid out in reverse order, just as taking a sheet of paper and then closing it in half, and then so you replicate everything at the end of the line.
So you're gonna see. That's funny. So you're gonna see in the reverse order slavery, worship, and gender. Right?
yes, right. And so gender will be the last thing that will be dealt with.
Okay, so where is slavery? Maybe let's fill in these spots here before we go to the end. What do we have in this history? You got the flood taking you to Ham, and then what's huh? Oh, that's baby
Moses,
Moses. Okay, got the Moses, which represents what? What is this period?
Alpha of ancient Israel.
Ancient Israel.
Ancient Israel, Alpha.
Okay, so Moses is the Alpha, right? Then what do we have here?
Jesus,
Okay,
Omega,
what was that? Omega, did you say?
Omega of ancient Israel.
Okay, so this was ancient. Okay, let's go to our end down here now. You can also see it. So what do we have down here?
The ancient of Alpha of modern Israel.
modern Israel.
The modern. And it's the alpha and the omega, right?
Omega.
Okay. Okay, so now, so this would be Millerite, right?
Yes.
And this would be,
144,000.
okay. Okay, now let's put on slavery. Word is slavery. Because we know it's going to be slavery. We know it's going to be slavery, worship, and gender. So where is slavery?
Millerite.
In
Modern Israel, right there, right, there you go.
okay. And then we have worship. Where's worship, Mark?
Right after slavery.
1888.
Anybody remember the year?
The Sabbath.
1888.
Say, Donna?
63,
50,
Okay, we're at 63 at
63.
slavery.
Yeah.
And what about worship?
1850?
No, it's gotta be on that.
No,
No.
that's
Um,
after.
1863.
1888.
1888.
Okay. I think somebody said it, so I'm not sure. But thank you. Okay, so 1888. And then we finished it off with sexism and gender in our history. Okay,
On your map, map, you have 1989 over by, the Alpha or the Omega.
yeah, thank you. You're
Okay.
cheat sheet too. Okay. I do have a cheat sheet too. Okay, and then we have second advent.
second advent.
Okay. Yep. Okay, so that, anything else that we need on that line? That's all I had on my cheat sheet anyways.
On your, on ancient,
Uh-huh. Yeah, I know. I
there's-
have some.
where it says Jesus, it says you're supposed to put love.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't know it well enough to actually explain it, but if anybody wants to elaborate on that, that would be great. So, yeah, okay. We've got modern and ancient. Anything else?
No, on that one.
Okay, so we can see what is God teaching us then here? I mean, we got the basics already. What do we know about gender?
Quality?
Equality? Yeah,
There's more than two.
there's more than two.
Non-binary, I guess, you could say.
Uh-huh,
God has no gender.
there you go. And how do we know that? Something we need to know. How do we know that?
That God has no gender?
Yeah.
Well, he has male characteristics, female characteristics.
I was,
He's a parable.
parable. Yeah, parable. We'll have to erase some of this and get to our next line. So, through a parable, I was reading this morning in Genesis 1 and going through those verses. And you know, ask the question to others, not to us, but to others. So what gender is God? If God made, and the word man in that verse is mankind or humanity, including all humanity. So God created all humanity, and he created them male and female. That's literal, right? He creates them, we'll do the literal and the spiritual or the natural. So the literal is they are male and female. If I'm doing this right, you guys correct me if I've got anything wrong. So how do we get there to the spiritual, knowing that the thing that I was looking at, that I was focused on, was they're made in his image. All humanity, if I do that right. It equals his image or God's image. So God made humanity in God's image. And that an image we know is a copy, right? Is a representation, also a likeness. It says that image and likeness. In the image and likeness of God, made male and female. So his image is, if I'm understanding this correctly, male and female. Or like Phil said, characteristics or traits. Did I spell that right? I know I might have spelled it wrong. So his traits or characteristics are made up of both male and female. And we can see that in Proverbs, in other places, but we can see that in Proverbs. And then the verse we were reading last night, Isaiah 50, I think it was verse 3. Was it verse 3, you guys? The one that said no man. Let me look it up.
Right. Instead of no man, it's no one.
Right. Because it goes on and gives you that in the next portion of that verse. So verse 2, wherefore when I came, was there no man, it says. And I think it was David that pointed out the word man and the Strong's. Is David with us? And Kathy?
Yeah. It was the same word, and I forget what this, it was a Hebrew.
I had it written down, but I redid my board. So encompassing humanity, is that right? It wasn't the same as, I don't think you had it as the same. I didn't look them both up as the one in Genesis 1. That's supposed to be a C. Now I know how to spell it. Sorry. So he creates humanity, and he creates humanity in his image. He makes a likeness. God creates humanity in God's image with male and female characteristics and traits. What I always saw in Proverbs was this back and forth between Solomon talking about the father with the instruction and the mother with the law, and it goes through this dialogue. It always had me asking in my prayers, God male and female. So it's not that God is male and female, but that God has the characteristics or the traits, the masculine, feminine traits. So if that's where we were here, and that's where we go at the end, then what our work is to bring people to understand God, who he is, who God is, and his image. Because from Eden to Eden, you've got Eden in the beginning and Eden, which is restoration. Restoration is to restore to what it was. So what does that mean to us when it comes to the LGBT community?
That we accept them.
Yeah, because of humanity. So as we were talking at the end of our Sabbath school lesson, that's going to be a very, it'll be a very, the wrong word, aggressive, but definitely we're going to see the Christian world hate this message. Those that are fighting against equality, fighting against rights for women and rights for LGBTQ community, they have that hatred in their heart. And it's, and what we just read in Desire of Ages as well, about that, how Jesus is, I'm trying to remember, maybe Christina remembers the passage, it was one that I commented on, and how they were not to go to the hard-hearted, but to go to those that would believe God and have faith. So we see a lot of hard-hearted people. We know that in Adventism, we know they failed the test with back in, this would be 1989. They failed the test back in here in 2015 with women's ordination, confession, and gay marriage. So in God's mercy, he gave us time to catch up to what was going on. So anybody have any more comments to that?
Just a short one on what we believe and opposed to conservatism. To restore is to bring to full equality those that are of the LGBT, no matter what they claim to be, that every human being is God's plan to restore them. And we accept them, yes, that was said, but it's full restoration for them.
Right. And to hate it, this is my simple version, is to you know, when we come up to our test, every test that we've had along the way is and there's a whole lot more to this, but I see it as just a simplistic thing, that the test that we've come along the way, each test that we pass only if we love God, because if we love God, we embrace what he's teaching us. And so you're going to see this battle between those that love God and those that hate God. But at the same time, those that hate God are a good portion of the professors of Christ. So picture that, what it's going to look like.
I found that sentence that you were referencing in Desire of Ages.
Yeah.
It's in the paragraph Desire of Ages 238.4, and the sentence goes, the servants whom God had chosen for a special work were not allowed to labor for a hard-hearted and unbelieving people, but those who had hearts to feel and faith to believe were especially favored with evidence of his power through the prophets.
Thanks for putting that in there, because it made me think of something else I didn't think about earlier. But those who had hearts to feel, as we go into the study later in the afternoon, and I don't know how long it's going to, we may not get there today, but, and we talked about it briefly last night, how much the heart has to do with it. The heart has to do with the nature of humanity. And you either have a heart to feel, or you've got this hard, stony heart that is going to be nothing but hate. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So this proxy war, this proxy war is going to be those that profess Christ but hate him and don't even know it. They're going to think, I think somebody said this during Sabbath school, they're going to think they're doing God's will. Yeah, Donna said it when she was talking about Andrea. They're going to actually think that they're doing God's will by persecuting. So the agitation, I don't really have space in here, but the agitation begins around Canyon. Is the agitation of this. And then what Elder Tess has presented is that by now, the Levites already have to have a knowledge of these issues. Slavery, Sabbath, or I'm sorry, sexism, racism, and LGBTQ. They need to already have an idea of those things and going on, which I'm very thankful. I don't think my son will ever watch this, but I'm very thankful that he gets it. Him and I were talking a few days ago, and even though, you know, both my kids stopped going to church, and he understands this issue. He understands the issue of all three. And we were talking specifically about gender and LGBT because I know that I wasn't a Christian when I had them, and I started reading the Bible when they were just coming out of elementary school, maybe going into junior or before elementary school, right in there somewhere. But I sure had my own thoughts on that I wouldn't want my kids to be indoctrinated into such things because I didn't want it to affect them and how wrong I was. So him and I were having that conversation about, he says even in his own self, you know, it's only been like 5 years that he could say the things that he says and feel and be okay and know that it is right and know that it is true, that they have rights. They are humanity. They have rights. Women have rights. And this whole patriarchal period here in between is Satan's work. I don't know if anybody else has any better way to say it.
And Elder Parmenter even said that the LGBT, they have to be represented in our movement.
Yes.
That means they have to be in our movement.
Right, exactly.
So that's going to be a test for all of us. Yeah, we say, yeah, but it's going to come directly to our movement, even in our group.
Yeah.
So,
I have my cousin who she transgender. She was a cop. She's a detective. She's about 20 years, and then a niece. And I share all of this with them, just to give my little niece. The other day she was like, maybe maybe this is why God's mad at me, is because how I am. And so I was explaining to her what we were learning and sending her some things about, you know, the genes and everything like that. So it's really sad for the kids because even though they are gay or whatever, they still feel guilt, a lot of them.
Well, that's what I think is the beauty and what this message is going to give to people. It's going to free them from that guilt, because it's not, they have no reason to be guilt. The guilt is upon them because of what the Christian world has.
What society looks at.
Yeah, but I think what Donna, let me ask Donna, but I think what Donna was suggesting. Go ahead, say it again, Donna.
okay, Elder Parmenter said that the LGBT community has to be represented in our movement. We have to have all representations of humanity in our movement. So we will be tested on an individual as well as group. We can say, oh yes, you know, equality for them, but it's going to be, we're going to be tested.
What do you,
whether or not we really do feel that they are equal.
now, when you say that we're going to be tested by that and it's in our movement, do you mean, in other words, that there's going to be people coming out of the closet kind of thing, or what do you mean?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, could be. Or there's going to be people who, you know, like the Methodists. I don't know if you guys know about the Methodists. I think it's the Methodists. or Episcopalian, I don't know, one of them, Methodist or Episcopalian, they have a large percentage of their Christian groups are homosexual. They have like churches that are devoted to
Okay.
LGBT and they're Christians. They of all the Protestant, sect of Christians, they have welcomed LGBT community.
So in other words, instead of just representing the LGBT community within the movement, we have members that are in the LGBT community. That's the way I understood it. And
Yes.
and it totally makes sense.
Yes.
Yes, it would be. And it'll test us, Donna's saying, it tests us to, do we really love God? I mean, do we, we can say, yeah, they're all out there, but when they turn out to be one of us, are we going to still see them as humanity? Are we ready to still see them as humanity? And we ought to be. With everything that we're learning, we ought to be ready to just embrace as anyone as humanity. And that's the beautiful thing about the conversations I have with my son, is he actually uses the language of humans as opposed to male or female, man or woman. He actually uses those terms. So there are those that see that it's about humanity. It's not about male and female. I was reading I think I posted the article in the chat, but it probably was only the people that were there at the time to see it, but I can post it again. I was reading an article on the difference between, and we've studied, some of us have already studied it a lot anyways, but it was just a good article I found on the difference between gender and sex, to help us better understand that as we continue to grow. So is there anything else up here that we can add to or discuss? We went silent. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and erase some of it because I want to be able to go to the next line, which is Acts 27. So, and you guys have all that from, and if anybody wants what was on the board, I do have it in a file. You can do that. Would like to, otherwise, you may have drawn it out yourself. But if you do want it, I have it in the file, that board that we just did.
Yeah, maybe if you could include it in an email afterwards, all the notes.
Yeah, I didn't want to do it because I wanted to test our brains.
Yeah, no, I got it. Thanks.
Well, I cheated. I'm sorry. I had most of it pretty much remembered, but I just been. So anyway, so now we're going to go on to Acts 27, and let's start filling in our blanks. What's the story of Acts 27?
The story of two ships. It's story of two institutions.
Equals two institutions, which are
The protector or defender of the people?
institutions. I don't do very well on the spot. Okay, what are those two institutions?
Alexandria,
What?
Alexandria,
Adventism,
and Adramitium.
USA and SDA.
The SDA Church in the United States.
There you go.
Wait,
And the United States. Okay, so those are the two institutions, the two ships. Okay, now what are the two ships?
Alexandria and Adramitium.
And Adramitium.
Oh, I'm never gonna be able to spell that one. Okay, that's good. So I know I won't spell that one right. I really messed it up. Okay, so where do we begin? Alexander, somebody said Alexandria is what? Somebody was mentioning it?
Protector or defender of the people?
Protector or defender of the people. Okay, so when does Alexandria set sail?
1798.
98.
And you ship again.
Time of the end.
Okay, where's its first stop? Time of the end. Okay, which is
1798. Oh,
98. Okay, and where's its first stop?
Myra,
Myra
And
Lydia,
Mycia,
Lycia.
and Myra.
Myra means. When is this stop?
bitter.
Yeah.
1844. 1844
Mhm.
And it's
Oh,
harvest.
bitter.
bitter.
Well, then and Andrea on the first, on the time of the end, it's wheat.
Wheat being loaded.
Yeah.
Reloaded. And where did we learn that from? Trying to think
Hmm.
back on one of the studies. Where did we learn this about the wheat being loaded? Back into history and seeing what the ships of Alexandria were, correct?
Harvest.
What the ships of Alexandria were, because the ship didn't actually go to Rome. It was a ship that fills up with the wheat and takes it and disperses it. And we're not going to go to, we'll get to the end later where it ended, but this is where they began, in Alexandria. And then they took the wheat. Okay, so next on the line.
1863,
Okay.
90s.
Minus.
Nitish.
And what happened here?
Contrary winds. Sailed under Crete.
We see the ship
They go off course.
goes off course. Goes off course. We see the ship traveling, and in here it goes off course. And you have contrary winds.
You have 126. From
Yeah.
1863, you have 126 to time of the end, 1989.
Yeah, that comes on our next line. What else is here? Anything else here?
Uh-uh.
I remember the word flesh being in there. I don't know if you remember that.
There's a civil war going on.
Yep, it's Civil War going on. He's tracing, and we'll get more into that as we come down here too. Okay, so next, our next stop
1989.
goes off course.
Lucia.
Lucia.
Okay, good, 1989. And Tony already pointed out it's 126 from here to here.
Time of the end.
And
Lucia.
and it is Lycia.
Wise.
And the line. So we know if we were looking at our agricultural model, we're looking at this period of darkness here, right? And just added, but I think you can say this because the Ellen White takes the 1260, compares it with the 70, and then this, and that's the period of wilderness, the period of wilderness is the period as well, right? Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Before you approach, because you've got this darkness back here, you had this darkness. Before you approach, there's an opening of light. So we know that there's an opening of light that appears here. Okay, so anything else at 1989?
Time of the, oh, you got time of the end.
And our next stop.
Oh,
You're okay.
Paul gives a message to the leadership, which is rejected.
Right?
Mhm.
Because this is the beginning of what ship? The one I can't spell.
United States. Oh, Adramyttium.
Adramyttium.
Yeah. So it's Adramyttium.
Hmm.
Probably different that one. So it's the beginning of Adramyttium. This is the beginning of the ship of Alexandria here. And this is the beginning of the ship of Adramyttium. Where does Paul get on the Alexandria ship?
Mm.
Armageddon.
Yeah.
Alexandria.
Yeah, he gets on the ship in this journey here. With Alexandria, yeah, where? You can open up Acts 27 if you need to. We have two ships, and so we're looking at the story of both of them, right?
Mhm.
Anybody remember where Paul gets on the first ship, that where he gets on the ship of Alexandria?
Don't,
Uh,
I'm gonna go and get my Bible.
Myra, isn't it?
Egypt.
I think it's Myra. You're looking at Acts 27.
Oh,
Um,
I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, we're getting our Bible out to make sure, but doesn't he get on Adramyttium first? Or
Yeah,
then
in the story, yeah. Parable wise, we're looking at it parable wise. Yeah, he does get on Adramyttium, and then he gets on Alexandria, right? But when he gets, somebody help me explain this well, because I don't do it very well myself. Because he gets on another ship, which is Myra and Lycia, which is Alexandria. So maybe I've got that wrong. Somebody help me out.
and he boards the ship at Myra, Lycia.
Yeah. So I think that for me anyways, the hard thing is we're tracing both of them at the same time. And
Yeah.
prayerfully, I don't confuse them. So, because he gets on Adramyttium, and then they have the shipwreck, and then he gets on Alexandria. But we trace the ship, so I don't know, maybe you don't put him as being on there, but you trace the ship here. But I seem to remember that being marked there. We'll put it, we can put a question mark or take it off. So I might have that wrong. All the reason for us to do review. Okay, so what's our next waymark?
Euroclydon,
You're Clyde.
9/11.
9/11.
I thought the only difference was Adramyttium started 1989 and Alexandria was 1798. One was longer, wasn't it?
Say that again.
One ship had a longer timeline, didn't it?
Right.
Yeah, Alexandria did.
Yeah,
Alexandria.
right. That was the only difference. They're overlapping.
Yeah,
So when you got on the next one, the story started all over again.
yeah,
Right.
right. But the ship of Alexandria goes all the way till the end. He gets off that ship and gets off Adramyttium and gets a little shipwreck and gets on another ship of Alexandria. Okay, so we got Euroclydon. Okay, so I guess if you have your cheat sheet, maybe somebody does. I know Tony does, but if anybody else, what happened here?
It's caught in a storm.
Okay. These ones. What? You see the Y here, right? At the time of the end. So you got this period of darkness. Now you've got some plowing, right? On our agricultural model, you have plowing. You have plowing. You've got former rain, latter rain, and harvest. So you got this plowing. What do we see come here?
Is it line upon line?
Not as part of this particular study, but yeah, you see line upon line come in here. Not here.
Isn't that where they undergird the ship?
Yes, yes. They already had line upon line back here, but yes, they do use line upon line to undergird the ship. Okay, so yes, they do use line upon line to undergird the ship, but they have line upon line back here, and then Daniel 11:40 to 45 and formalization of the message and all those things. Okay, so they undergird the ship here.
Underneath there, you have the second and third angel's message underneath
There
there.
you go. Yeah, so you have the second And the third angel. Second and third angel.
And then 2019 midnight.
Yeah, so then our next two waymarks, what's our big one here?
Sunday law shipwreck.
Sunday law, shipwreck.
Sunday law. Shipwreck.
What about Midnight Cry?
That's where we're going
That'd
next.
be after the midnight. That'd be 2021.
So we have the shipwreck here, so what do we have here?
You have a midnight 2019 and then a midnight cry 2021.
And Midnight Cry, 2020.
There you go.
And so going to, Tony can't give this one. But she's cheating too. So what do we have?
Aren't we supposed to take notes?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So what do we have come here? Because we had the wise, right? We have the second and third angel here. What do we
Mm-hmm.
have here.
I know.
Somebody go to Acts 27. What verse is it? Where they measure.
Oh, the fathom, the 2520.
Yeah, 25, 20. So what does that mean?
Time setting.
What is that time? I don't know if that 2021 is supposed to be there. I'd have to go back to the, that's what was on her board. You can see this increase coming, right? But that is the time. You get time setting in this history here. You get time setting in this history, but you get the time here. Does that make sense? When we think about November 19, 2019, we had time setting in 2014, but just prior to, we got the time, correct? So they're measuring the fathoms and they're going to get the time. Did I hope I explained that right? So we have time setting back in here in 2014, 2012, but they're going to get the time here. And anybody correct me if I misstate anything. Okay, so what does shipwreck represent in our story?
The fall of the institution.
The fall of the institution, or what's another way?
Inequality.
Inequality, did you say? Yeah. But it's the fall of the institution. What happens here? The fall of the institutions, what is it? What does that mean?
Get cut off.
Cut off, another word?
Divided
Shut
into two
door.
groups.
Shut the door.
Door, shut door, yeah.
Shut the door. So it's a shut door, right?
Passengers divided into two groups.
Divided into two groups.
Paul gives a message to the island people, 11,000 workers.
So Paul goes to the island and gives a message to them. Okay. And so Paul gives a message. And then also at shipwreck, because we already sort of discussed this, that ship of Adramyttium is gone. And how does he continue his journey?
Alexandria.
Another ship of Alexandria, which is called
Castor and Pollux.
Castor and Pollux. And it is a ship of Alexandria. Okay, so what happens in our story between Sunday law? What happens with Paul? What's the first event?
After the shipwreck?
Yeah, after the shipwreck.
He's bit by a snake.
The snake. Yeah, these were the snake. And then their next,
They worship him. No, no.
There's a healing.
a healing, yeah,
The Father,
healing. Is healing.
yeah.
Okay. So going back to the beginning, 1798, the ship of Alexandria set sail. The time of the end. The wheat is loaded on, the grain is loaded onto the ship. Okay, historically what they did, ship is loaded with wheat and then you take it to doesn't take it to Rome, it takes it, we'll get to that in a minute. But it disperses the wheat. As it's fully loaded. And what happens to it along the way?
It gets discarded.
This week. So, okay, so then we get to 1989, we have the ship of Adramyttium, which begins the story. This is backing up with Alexandria. But we have the beginning of the story of Adramyttium, which is two ships, Adventism and the United States. It's the time of the end. You have marking the wise, marking Paul getting on the ship. And in here you have a south wind, right? That blows favorably, is that right?
Yes.
It's favorable, and then they come up to the east wind. Right?
Yes.
So that would be our storm. Second and third angel arrive. What's really interesting to see that is that you think about, I was listening to one of those Brazil classes again today, and I don't know if anybody's ever taught this. I probably have, but I missed things. But the second and third angel is he didn't say it this way, but it was in the plural, not one person. Okay, second angel, third angel. This is our experience. These are our experiences. So, like what we've learned is that Elder Tess, where she joined the movement, but she wasn't. That we wouldn't have known her to be the third angel, right? So this is where the angel arrives. It's the message that arrives. And our growth is in our growth in our experience makes us these angels, if that makes sense. Because we'll be giving the whole message. So he speaks in the plural, but the second and third angel, he just happens to be talking about those, not the first, but as in the plural. So it's the message, but it's the message that's given by the people. And we are part of those people. Okay, so what's our next remark? The
Close
shipwreck?
up.
Go ahead. Who spoke?
Close of probation.
Close the probation. Mhm. Which marks Castor and Pollux again. What do we have in these two remarks?
Syracuse and Rhegium.
Okay. And do you have what they mean?
To feel ill. And stomped coins.
And
favorable winds.
stamped coins with Castor and Pollux. So Castor and Pollux is there again.
Yeah.
Just to clarify,
Yeah.
yeah, COP. And Paul boards this ship, but it is of Alexandria. It's is of Alexandria, but it's Castor and Pollux. It's a sign. It's a sign of Castor and Pollux. So what does that mean? It's actually Alexandria, but it's got a sign of Castor and Pollux. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. There was a delay. I'm sorry. I don't know that it's been fully understood or opened up, but we can. I've gone back and looked at some of it, but not enough to say much on it. But Castor and Pollux, looking at who they are, we know that they were two sons of. I was looking it up, and I think it showed how accurate it was. There were several websites I thought said the same thing, but that Zeus was the father of one of them and not the other. But one of them dies, right? Anybody remember that story? So it's in understanding Castor and Pollux to get to these understandings. But you have Castor and Pollux here, close of probation, and then they find coins that are actually stamped as Castor and Pollux. So,
Okay. Yeah, good. That's a little bit of more information
but
on
I
the coins. Yeah.
don't know much more on that yet. But yeah, he does here on the it is a ship of Alexandria, so it's another ship of Alexandria, and it's named Castor and Pollux, and it takes them the rest of the way. Where does it take them to? Oh wait, somebody said it here.
Puteoli?
Right.
Yeah, I think Donna said Syracuse and Rhegium.
Yeah, she already did that.
Mm-hmm.
She also said, I think it was her that said favorable wind. So you have second advent. So I can see my weakness is on this line for sure. Where I still have a lot more to learn, because we also have to be able to tell the story that goes with it. You can't just have the things on the board. We have to be able to, I know I do. We need to be able to tell the story that goes with it. And,
Yeah.
And every waymark is a story itself, you know.
Exactly.
Every story is a story itself. And then every story can have like different perspectives. So there's a lot there to learn. Okay. Anything else?
How do we find out in which of the latest elder tests is Acts 27 revision that includes all of this? I've forgotten about this Syracuse and Rhegium, and I remember the Puteoli. Can anybody find out and maybe post it?
Somebody posted in the chat. Yeah, the most recent one where she goes through that. This is in the last 4 to 5, maybe further back. Last camp meeting.
Yeah.
So if somebody finds it, posted in the chat. So and we've done the notes on it too. So I have the notes if you. Yeah, I did the notes on this one.
Thank you.
So I can do that for you later. Okay, so anything else? Yeah, and this is still to be more understood. And we know that, you know, we're here, right? We can't be over to be able to understand fully what all that is. Okay. So anybody else? Anything? Before I take it away? I'm going to raise my Protestant line up. Make it easier for me. Okay, I'm going to take it off then. So I definitely see as we go through this one that there's a lot of things I do understand in Acts 27, but remembering the details is like, I definitely need work there.
Going over it is very helpful.
Yes, it is.
So this is excellent. You're doing great on your board work, by the
Oh, I have a cheat sheet.
way.
Amen.
That's what I need.
So I'm gonna see if I am not so good at straight line. I did all this when we were earlier so that I had it all ready to go. But it'd be far easier for me to have it higher.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So this is Protestant. So we did Eden to Eden. Did Acts 27, and now the Protestant. So we've got three histories. Our big line. So what are we marking here?
That's the first Great Awakening.
You have that. Hang on 1 second. First or the second?
First Great Awakening and then the second Great Awakening.
Let me check something real quick. The first is actually before 1798. Then maybe that's what you meant, but I want to double check it.
Yeah, it is.
So 1798, I believe, is the second Great Awakening. Is that correct?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
the first Great Awakening happened in the early 1700s.
Right. Okay. I thought I had one here, but I guess I don't. Okay.
It's not on the list. I mean, it's not on the chart, but
Yeah.
it is early 1700s, first Great Awakening.
Yeah. So this is, if this were 1798, it is the second, right?
Yes.
Great Awakening. Or maybe yeah, no, that's right. I was looking at the one that you guys are looking at the same one. Okay, so back in here, you have the first Great Awakening.
Yes.
Okay. Because I have more on that too. Okay, so the first and second Great Awakening, which is, what'd you say, early 1700s?
Yes.
Early to mid, and 1798, you have the second Great Awakening. Okay, so what's our first history? The structures, remember the three structures? I think that was the title.
Ancient Israel? It's the first.
No.
Is
We're
that-
looking at the history. We're looking at the histories of Protestantism from 1798.
in God we trust?
Yes, give me the date.
Okay, wait, just a correction. First Great Awakening happened between 1730 and 1770s.
Yeah, mid, okay. That's what I thought. Mid to 17, what?
30s through the 70s.
70. Yeah, thought it was mid. Okay. So 1798 is the second Great Awakening.
Yeah.
And you've got the Millerite history here, Adventism leading up to, what's our dates here?
1863, National Reform Association, NRA.
There you go. To 1900. You got the National Reform Association.
NRA, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Now, what is the, I think I had to ask the questions without saying it straight out. So what have we been looking at on these lines and why? What do we see? What do we see going on down here with this voting thing?
Is it threats?
There you go. The threat. They
Mhm.
see a threat, right? They see a threat. Okay, so what's the threat in this history?
Jews, Seventh-day Adventists, and free thinkers.
And especially Catholics?
And Catholics, yeah.
Catholic and free free thinkers.
Free thinkers.
Okay, so they see a threat, they see this as the threat, and they mobilize, right? And that in what their mobilization brings about the NRA, right? The National Reform Association.
Right.
Okay. So this includes 1888 history as well. And
Yes.
we read a lot of those documents when we were reading all the A.T. Jones documents. I remember the American papacy was one of them. The one about the Constitution, I can't remember the name of it. But if there's anybody here that doesn't have those, wants those titles, I can look them up later. You can go back on our YouTube channel, we have titles on it there too. Okay, so there are three histories where they see a threat and they mobilize. And so this history here, success or failure.
Failure.
Failure. And we saw a lot of that in those A.T. Jones documents, because you could see there was a lack of unity among them for one. But what did we see for those that was with us on those nights that we did those, when we went through those documents? You think about the question here. What did we learn about the enemies? Who's their enemy? Well, obviously we have all the threats. Let me see if I have that. I have the three structures that have a little bit more on it. I just had to remember where I had it. I had it in my hand this
The
morning.
Irish? Was it the Irish?
Yeah, and the Catholics, yeah, and actually that was back in 1844. You saw that I don't remember what it's called. The Irish Catholic riots, Irish Catholic riots, right? Okay. And that was back in 1844, back in this history as well, too. So definitely the Catholics were their enemy when there are those that say that they're our friends and they're not. So they're enemies. Okay, so where's our next history take us to? And we've also been reading the book, the evangelicals as well, and understanding more of this history. This history in here, what do we see right after? You got 1900. What do you see after that? Anybody remember? There was a chapter in the evangelicals. It's not part of our main lines, but if anybody remembers, because what goes on in here is what leads to this one. And somebody said also, in God we trust, right? So this whole line, Protestants, is in God we trust.
Fundamentalist modernist conflict?
There you go. Yeah, so you have the fundamentalists and the modernists. And who basically won that match.
The modernists?
The modernists. Which makes the fundamentalists mad, that leads to the next event. So back here, just to back up, and I might have this backwards. I don't remember which one was school and which one was side, but you have the old side, new side, and it might be backwards. Oh, and to where you have the old school and the new school, right? So this battle, and this takes you back into Calvinism, which is what A.T. Jones also walks out. He takes you to show you, that was one of the other documents I'm remembering, that the National Reform Association is the Presbyterian Reformed Church, the three different things there. You think of Calvinism, the Reformed Presbyterian Church, that is the NRA. So we see way back here, you have the Presbyterians and those coming out of Calvinism that represent this old side, this old school. The same thing as it carries on through here. The fundamentalists would be that basically your old school in your old side or your fundamentalists here as well. But they are what formed the National Reform Association. And this is where they started to stamp the coins in God we trust, right? Okay. So what did they want to do in this history?
Constitutional amendment.
Constitutional amendment. Do they want to amend the Constitution? What else?
Sunday law.
Sunday law. I'm not quite doing it right, but
These would be, I'm thinking of it as controls. That was their idea, to control.
yeah. So the Sunday law is going to affect who?
Adventists?
Jews and Adventists.
Adventist, yeah. Jews.
Jews, yeah.
But when it comes to amending the Constitution, why did they want to amend the Constitution? So they can
I
get rid
think
of
they
Jews.
wanted to make sure that it was a Protestant country and get rid of the Catholics on that one.
They wanted to be proud of who they are.
Yes.
Repeating the history of the Catholic Church. And so the Catholic Church was the universal church. It was universal. It was the Christian church, universal. And we want to make sure there's no trace of that in us. So we want to make sure we stamp that Constitution as Protestant Christian America. So they wanted to make sure that they put their mark, that we are a Protestant Christian nation. To get rid of the Catholics. Okay. So what's our next history? And in this period of time, you have like World War I.
1940s, 50s?
Yeah, 40.
1900,
What was that?
is it 1900?
Oh, 19. Yeah, thank you. I knew that, but I'm writing what she said.
Okay.
I think she said it. Maybe I said it wrong. Linda, if you said it right, I'm sorry. So it's 1940s, 1950s, right? And who rose up in this period?
Billy Graham.
Billy Graham.
And we've been reading him in the evangelicals. We read some of it again on Wednesday night. Okay, what's the threat in this history? Where were they afraid? After World War II, and then actually 1945 would be the end of World War III. What were they afraid of?
Communism.
Communism.
Yeah.
Threat. Okay, so the threat here is the Jews, the SDAs, Catholics, free thinkers. Their solution is to place a Sunday law and amend the Constitution. And the purposes for both of them, the Sunday law would not wipe out everybody. So to wipe out everybody, they needed to amend the Constitution. They also stamped the coins, "Within God We Trust." This was all done by the NRA, National Reform Association, which is Calvinism, which is the Reformed Presbyterian Church. Covenanters, that's the other one I was looking for, the other word I was looking for, the Covenanters. So, okay, so the threat is communism. Billy Graham rises up, right?
Right.
And there were many others in between getting to this point. Okay, so Billy Graham. So what's the solution? What do they try to do? What do they do?
They want to somehow make sure that the country acknowledges God. And they have different ways of doing that.
Good job.
Starting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
So they need to acknowledge God, start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay.
They have the motto, "In God We Trust."
Okay. National motto. And
We want to make sure that everybody realizes it's a capitalistic country.
I knew you'd come up with that one because you were big on that discussion with me. Okay, capitalist. And then they also wanted to deal with the Constitution, but they were not able to. So they managed to do this. They did not do that. But what's happening in this history when it comes to the Constitution? We know that they wanted to amend it here, right?
Right.
To this history, it is not as, I don't know if irrelevant is the right word to use, but because they're going through this transition to where you get to the end history and you don't need to amend it because everybody just sees it as a, so they even though they never amended the Constitution, they succeeded when they get to this history of everybody just thinking that we're a Christian nation, where they, you know, you can just read the Constitution. It had to do with their interpretation. That's the word I'm looking for. Had to do with interpretation, how they interpret it. So that was going on here with how they interpret it, getting us to that point there. Okay, anything else with this history and communism?
Well, the church and state are coming together with Eisenhower and Billy Graham.
Okay, church and state. Okay. Yep.
Just a question on nationalism. Where does that fit in?
What's that?
Nationalism.
Repeat your question.
Yeah, where does nationalism fit in with this on this line?
Oh, okay.
In this period, yeah.
The whole line. I didn't know if you're talking about it.
Yeah, it would be the first history with Eisenhower.
From in our studies of the A.T. Jones documents, that's one thing we saw that, and actually, if anybody remembers, a couple of those documents that we read takes that hatred way back to the beginning. But throughout this history, what you're seeing is this belief that this is a white Christian nation and how
Yes.
they fought against, they did not want people coming from Eastern and Southern Europe. They wanted people, only those that came from Northern or Western Europe, being the white Nordic look, and claimed that they were more intelligent and more better suited for what they wanted of this nation, and that those from East and South Europe were not as intelligent. They'd have more crime. So there was this, I don't know, stigmas, right? Stop that. Stop that. Placed on the different nationalities, right? You know, very back here, all the way back here. And what they wanted this nation to then be. So that just continued in here as well with nationalism as well. And at the speed that carries through the whole thing, which brings you to the end there as well, where you saw that rise of Trump and this white nationalism come back in, and then you now see it in countries all over nations, different nations all over. Okay.
Yes,
You guys have
exactly.
anything to add on that?
What was that again?
I said, did anybody have anything to add on that?
Okay, the Christians become Judeo-Christians.
Thank you.
The fundamentalists and a fundamentalist become evangelicals.
Okay, so let's raise this one up. Communism. Okay, so it becomes Judeo-Christian. And the fundamentalists become evangelicals.
Yeah.
Okay. I think, you know what? This one here comes later. The fundamentalists to evangelicals, it comes, that's part of the development. Somebody help me out just in case I have that wrong.
It's in between the 40s and the 50s.
It is?
Yep.
Okay, I thought it was a development that actually, okay, we'll leave it there for now. I thought it was a development that happens that leads us to here.
It did progress to become
Yeah.
more mainstream, but it started then.
Okay, so what's our third line or third history?
Is it 1989?
Close.
1979.
1979
79.
to the end.
60s? No.
To the end. 1979, leading up to, yeah, I mean, a lot of things going in here. That's where you had the Iranian War, right? The Iranian War. But what was going on here? It was in this time.
That
where
was
you
the
had-
Iranian War in 79 for sure.
Yeah. In here you had Falwell, right? This is where you had Falwell
Oh, yeah,
in the moral majority beginning.
right.
Okay. So I think that we'll start with these histories here. It's three things that happened in here. If anybody, I mean, I have my two notes, but if you, let's try to test our minds for those that don't have notes. What are the three things? So you've got this history here, and it's the same group that we see carry out all the way through. But you have three main events here that lead to this rise. And remember, Jackie brought up nationalism. So you have nationalism that goes through the whole course. Nationalism, which encompasses many things, not just race, but other nationalities and such. But it's going to cover race. So what do you have? What are these three
You
events?
have
Civil
the
rights.
second wave feminism.
Okay, we're at.
So which comes first?
I don't
Civil rights.
necessarily need
Civil
to
rights.
Give me the order.
Civil rights first.
And the women's movement.
Yeah, give me the order.
Oh, it'd be civil rights first.
Okay, civil rights
Second wave feminism.
and feminism.
Right.
Then LGBTQ.
Yeah, Stonewall.
Stonewall.
Yes.
So you got the same group that carries through with their Calvinistic beliefs, part of the NRA that eventually develops into the rise of communism. They see communism as a threat, which when they start linking capitalism to Christianity. And Billy Graham, we've been seeing is kind of, there's probably a lot of things about him, but one thing I seem to pick up through what we're reading is Billy Graham seemed to just want to bring everybody together And that's not really what this group wanted to do. They didn't want to embrace everybody because they have a lot of hate for people, for various people, various groups of people. They have hate for and we know that they embrace the Jews here, but they have hate for the different nationalities. They have different races, excuse me. But they are conservative and hold on to their conservative values, and they're interpreting the Constitution in a way that they see people having equal rights without being able to recognize that these issues come about because people don't have equal rights, which is really amazing when you watch the things that they say today, that how they're fighting and saying that, you know, all lives matter, and they're cutting out the critical race theory, and all those things are going to be substantial when we get to these 2022 elections. Okay, so we have civil rights, second wave feminism, Stonewall, which enrages the, who remembers some of the details? Because, what am I trying to think? When, I think I have abortion on my mind in this history, although it's not part of feminism and abortion. So what side actually, that's probably what I'm trying to look for. What side was that what we would call the far right on when it came to abortion at the time?
They were
for
pro-abortion in the beginning.
Yeah.
Does anybody remember what turned them from pro-abortion to
They wanted to be anti-Catholic.
be anti-Catholic? And the liberals were actually, it was reversed, right? Okay, so these events lead up to what becomes the moral majority, right? And Jerry Falwell. Interesting to see the sun definitely fell from his throne of grace in our history. Okay, so what's the threat in this history?
Socialists,
yeah, socialist. Oops. So why is socialism a threat?
it would be giving rights to people,
Yeah, because they still connect it back to,
equality.
they connect it back to communism.
Yeah,
Connect it back to communism. Okay, so socialists are the threat. Which is, you know, that's another thing that's really hard for me to, I mean, I never believed that you shouldn't be helping people. I did see how everybody needs to be able to work and not be lazy. But what I didn't understand is how society stacked the deck, how these issues, these movements stack the deck to make it so difficult, and it goes all the way back, you know, slavery made it so difficult for minorities to get educations, to be able to, and then I was reading again on the redlining, is that what they call it, redlining neighborhoods, to put them specifically in places to make things more difficult for them so that they did not have the advantages that this Christian right, white standard has. So and what people are missing in our history here, what people are missing, and they don't want to look at it, they want to get rid of the critical race theory, that people won't look back at the history and won't see how we've oppressed and suppressed. Is that a right word for it? So that some people don't have a chance. Many don't have a chance, but they refuse to recognize that. But what's interesting to see is, because like I said, I have family that they don't even go to church. They're not, whatever they want to call themselves. I know what I grew up in. None of us went to church. We might have believed there was a God, but none of us knew anything about anything. And yet they're drinking from the stream that tells them that these blacks are threatening to us with their saying that Black Lives Matter. And what we've been able to understand, learn by going back into these histories is to see the damage that was done, the suffering that is done, the holding back, the suppression that has happened. And this battle is to set the captives free, right? Set the captives free. So what's the other threats here?
You said it, the blacks.
Blacks?
Feminists,
Women, yeah, feminists,
Yeah,
LGBTQ.
LGBTQ,
Muslims.
Muslims,
secularists.
secularists. They would be like your, yeah. Because they actually call the Democrats godless people, right?
Yeah, communist. Atheists.
And they're not.
I know.
It's really funny how they've somehow found a way to deceive the world into thinking they blame the socialists to be communists when the socialists do not have a communist mindset. They have a freedom and equality for all people. It's the communist mindset that has that mindset of we are superior beings, and and what the Christians don't realize is they have embraced the mindset of communism by anti-equality for all people except people who they feel or suits them, you see. So it's really interesting because I think one of the tools that can be used is to learn what communist really is and realizing that it is nothing to do with socialistic mindset of the 21st century. It is totally the opposite. So even today when they accuse the liberal, left-wing extremists of communist mentality, that is so false because they do not have a communist mentality. They have a equality mentality. So I think one of the secrets to, revealing this deception that they've created and calling socialism communism is totally false. It shows their ignorance as to what communism really is. They're totally ignorant as to what they're saying. In fact, I can guarantee you they probably wouldn't be able to explain what communism really is. And if they did, we could pluck out characteristics that they themselves have embraced in their own Christianity. So if anybody's going to be a true communist, it's going to be fundamentalist, evangelical, conservative, right-wing mindset. They're closer to communism, a communist mindset, than anybody is.
I think go ahead, somebody gonna say something?
Good thought.
I think about this group here as well, with the conversation that I had that I discussed the other night.
Oh yeah, because when I did that, the thing on Belarus, which very close knits tied to Russia. I mean, even what's his name, the president of Belarus? Oh gosh, Lukashenko. He said, "Well, you could call me anything, and I could be, but thank God I'm not a gay." Thank God I'm not gay. That would be the worst thing on earth.
And that's the thing that I was going to say about the conversation that I had with my sister that I mentioned that was going on, is that basically what you're saying. I don't want to go through the whole thing on recording, but by not allowing them rights, the same equal rights that you have you are automatically by default saying, putting yourself above another group of people. And another group of people doesn't deserve what you have. How can anybody think that way? It's a lack of education. You're right. I think it was Donna that just said that. The lack of education and ignorance that they're in to that if you just, and I remember when I early on started reading the Bible, I realized what we had to do. We had to think. We had to think. We don't think. We just do what society norms have taught us. But when we stop and think, we can realize and see how wrong something is. So to me, just this one as an example with the situation that I had, it's like people are not thinking what they're saying, because what you are saying is a group of people, whether it be this group, this group, this group, this group, this group, or this group, a group of people does not deserve to be on the face of this earth as you do. Or if you are going to be on the face of this earth, like they do with many, is enslave them. Enslave them. They're in captivity. Enslave them. And we were talking about that last night with Joseph and how they were making bricks without straw when it comes to taxes and the rich being able to get out of their tax paying, and the burden of taxes goes upon the ones that don't have it to give. So where they have to work more for less. So I was kind of losing track of time, but we actually go till 12:30. But for me, that's all I have here right now. Unless anybody else, I mean, we can go through some discussion on this if anybody's prepared to.
There's one more threat.
Yeah,
It's the immigrants.
yeah, the immigrants. That was here.
Good job.
Yeah, I don't know if I spelled it right. I don't really, it's an A. So annoying.
Yeah, question on Billy Graham. Oops, sorry.
So what'd you say?
Yeah, not unless somebody else was going to say something here. It's a question about Billy Graham's time frame and the time period that he was in. And he had a lot to do. Maybe somebody can fill in some of this information and just round it off. But he had a lot to do with conservatism because he bolstered up the business community. And I think this came out in one of our studies, in the book maybe that we were reading, but how this led to the support of, and actually against socialism. I just can't quite grasp that and connect them together, but I know Billy Graham was part of it.
Yeah, we'd have to go back to those chapters in the evangelicals again as well to see the buildup of this fight against communism, to keep communism out, and the threat being communism, and how they then eventually got to that place.
Yeah, because this took a period of time to
so
go
cute.
in that direction.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Donna.
I said the dog is so cute.
Oh.
They heard me say, so I don't know if I said lunch. Not, I said, but they also know how to tell time. They got their own little clock and they know how to tell time. So, so what we see here, stay down. What we see here is this. What went on, we know 2012 to 2014, we roughly touched on that the Democrat, we had Democrat president, and he was changing the shape of America, and it was hated by the Republican far right. So Bannon, Miller, and Sessions are the ones that brought about that, and used Cambridge Analytica and all that to influence people's minds, to get them to go to make decisions based on, hey guys, on a emotional level, without information, without facts. And that's where we're at today, is people are making all these decisions based on emotion and not fact. But I believe this history is repeating itself. No, stop. I believe this history is repeating itself, where we have a Democrat president. You can see him. And you look at what's happening, and we know we have a compromising president, but there are some strides being made. I try to think of it as like looking at it from a big picture, and a big cluster of people that are just hate all this, right? That just hate all this. And what they're witnessing, what they're having to witness with their hands tied. Imagine your hands being tied, you can't do anything about it. And they don't have that kind of hold in the House and Senate. It's really a struggle because the Democrats don't have the strength and power in the House and Senate to do what I believe they had back here. So so it's kind of a battle with compromisers in there and those that are not quite as supportive of some of these rights, but they're watching these things happen. And so think about it as if your hands are tied and something terrible is happening and you can't stop. You're going to come out with a vicious attack. And what we see with them when it comes to voting rights and gerrymandering and getting and positioning themselves to a win. And I'll put in the chat the article that I was reading on. I was looking at stuff on trying to look into stuff that's like what led to the 2014 win. And I haven't finished the article, but there's some good things that I saw in it that I'll share in the chat. But they're going to come out with a vengeance. You know, it's like they talk about the pendulum when it swings, okay, but we saw them come back with a vengeance here, and we know where the lines take us to. So they're livid. They've got to be livid now. Look at the people, and plus Trump. What Trump exploded out of people was well, you put a whole combination of things in there, how they get them to act on an emotional level. I'm thinking about my family. One of my sisters said she used to be Democrat until Trump came along. It's like, what does that say? You know, because what happened was an explosion of people being able to express what was inside of them. And now they're having to bide their time, swelling up and swelling up. And so they're going to totally explode going into the Sunday law. And that we can actually see then as the agitations. And I could probably put it up and you guys could see it if I put it into the camera, maybe. Can you see that one? I don't know if you can read it, but you can see the agitation that comes in. And so they're bringing it to this boiling point to where they're going to really come out swinging. Anybody have any thoughts or comments on that?
What was that document from? It was.
I have to dig out which file it's in. I don't know which one it's in. It was LGC camp meeting number 15, October 31st, 2020. And I don't know if I did notes on it or not, but it definitely had the board work on it. So, but it had, and it was one of the things that it's too much to open up right now, I think. Yeah, it's too much to open up right now in a short period of time.
Was she talking about Ted Cruz during that meeting? Maybe I got the wrong one.
Yeah, that I don't remember. It might have been.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know if it's the same one you're talking about, but
yeah, she might have been. But so at that Panium or Pentecost or 2021, which we're headed towards, and I know that we might need to review the study where she talked about the waymarks, understanding the waymarks and how Waymarks are not just a date, they're like a series of events of a period of time, if that makes sense. So we see this swelling going on, and it's going to build to literally them exploding on LGBT, on the against the rights, women's rights, and persecution will soon follow. Anybody have any comments? Any other thoughts? Who are the three written on the? I've got Bannon, Miller, and Sessions. Steve Bannon, Stephen Miller, and Jeff Sessions.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And Bannon was part of Cambridge Analytica, right? Like CEO was SEO, Cambridge Analytica, right? Or was it SEO before it was Cambridge Analytica? But anyways, he was involved with that. I think he was CEO. And using then bringing in that tactic to get people to act on an emotional level without thinking. Any other thoughts or comments?
Really good exercise. Thank you.
Yeah, it showed me where my weaknesses
Really
are.
good, really, really excellent, excellent board work, excellent teacher, very, very good.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah.
I only copy what I learned, you guys. That's all I can do is copy what I learned. I'm trying to get better when it comes to, with Isaiah, and that's what we'll do in the afternoon, is understanding Isaiah and placing it in the right place. And, you know, we were talking about that some last night and how, you know, in Christ's time it was him, so who is it going to be now? So we were kind of touching on that. Well, that is all I have. So I guess we can break early unless anybody, and I'm not asking to break early because of the wrestling match that's going on at my feet. Just I don't have anything more to add right now. Then let's close in prayer. Donna, would you like to close in prayer?
Sure. Heavenly Father, thank you so much, Lord, for this wonderful Sabbath day. Thank you for all this fellowship, people from all over the country and maybe the world, I'm not sure. We just give you glory, Lord. We thank you for the review. It's much needed, Lord. With so much that we're learning, we pray for our minds to be able to keep all this in our minds, and so that we can bring it up when necessary and when needed, and help us, Lord, to be able to absorb all this information. And we know that we're going to have to absorb more as we go further. It sure does take us, is such a contrary, the teaching that you give us, Lord. As I remember back when I was an evangelical Protestant, and I thought, you know, when the closer you come, you're going to fix it all. And we don't have to do anything because Jesus is coming back and he's going to make it all right. And how I know that that was such a wrong teaching, and that when we start to go out to the different peoples, they're going to have, especially Protestants, they're going to have that mindset that why do we have to learn all these things? And those are probably not the ones that we're going to be ministering to. And so, Lord, I thank you so much for giving us all this information. Just help us to be able to really keep it in our minds and understand it so that we can share it with others. Thank you so much. We look forward to the next study in Isaiah 50 and 51. We praise you. We give you all the glory. We give you all the glory, Lord. In Jesus' most precious name, amen.